Okay, and we're rolling. So, I'm going to be reading the test log for attempting to terminate SCP-682. I really like him. He is hilarious. So, let's get on with it. Experiment log T-98816-OC108/682. Test log T-, you heard that shit before. So, cross SCP termination testing for SCP-682. Due to the highly aggressive adaptive, and intelligent nature of SCP-682, termination testing has been ordered, with clearance from OCA-5 Command, with major concerns raised about possible developed immunities due to the failure of SCP-409 and possible adaptations. All tests must first be carried out on tissue samples taken from SCP-682. This step may be bypassed only by an O5 command order. And command is capitalized for some reason. So, item 689. Tissue test recorded, overridden by O5 command. SCP-682 exposed to 689. Lights shut off in containment area. Lights remain extinguished for 5 minutes. Lights are switched on. 689 remains in its original position. 682 is in a pool of gray and black liquid with no observable life signs. D class is issued to physically verify SCP-682's termination with 2 agents supervising. D class enters 3 steps into containment area when SCP-682 rapidly rises and attacks D class personnel. SCP-682 breaks containment and escapes, killing 1 agent in the process. Remaining agent killed by 689 due to accidental observation during testing. It appears that 682 is not alive in a way that is currently understood, or is immune to 689. In addition, it appears 682 has prior knowledge of 689, or was somehow able to understand its function in order to play possum and escape. SCP-017. Tissue test recorded. Sample swallowed by 017 without incident. Termination test record. SCP-682 exposed to 017. 682 issues several sounds at extremely high volume, damaging several recording devices. Sound extends across several wavelengths, reported as the most god-awful roar by staff. 017 appears to stumble, then return to a far corner of the containment area. 682 attempts to break containment of both 682 and 017. 682 suppressed by agents and removed. 682 states, "You foul bags of tissue, you don't!" Data expunged. It is unclear if 682 somehow damaged 017 or communicated with it. Analysis of the recording sound is ongoing. Fucking up here. So, item 162. Tissue sample recorded, samples entangled without incident. 682 exposed to SCP-162. 682 begins thrashing violently, emitting several roaring sounds and issuing profanity directed at testing staff. The SCP-682 becomes entangled with SCP-162. Primarily in the lower body, head, and left forelimb. Entangled area undergo massive trauma due to 682's thrashing. After 4 minutes of continued exposure, 682 lunges away from 162, severing its lower jaw and the left forelimb and left hind limb, and causing serious tissue damage to many areas of its body. 162 remains attached to the left forelimb of 682. 682 breaks containment using 162 against several agents, staff, and researchers, resulting in 11 deaths, 86 injuries. Forelimb and 162 removed from SCP-682 during re-establishment of containment. 2 additional deaths occurred during the recontainment of 162. Note: General Blanc has requested that Mr. Noah Kiam, or however the fuck you pronounce that, and the members of staff involved with the approval of this test report to Site Command for a disciplinary hearing. I vote yes. 061. Tissue test recorded, overridden by O5 Command. SCP-682 exposed to, 061. SCP-682 enters the relaxed state, consistent with 061 exposure. 682 is given the command, lie down. 682 remains unresponsive. Command repeats twice before SCP lowers itself to the ground. Movements noted to be very sluggish and jerky. 682 given the command, roll onto your back. SCP-682 is unresponsive. Command repeated 3 times. 682 shudders several times, partially rolling over before returning to former position. Command repeated 6 times. 682 appears to undergo a violent seizure, partially rising before collapsing to the floor. 682 given the command, stand up. 682 rapidly rises and breaches containment. 682 emits high-pitched screech. All human beings in a 15-meter radius suddenly enter the relaxed state, consistent with 061 exposure. 682 consumes several members of staff before being contained by specially equipped emergency response teams. Sonic stun adaptation lost from 682 after 2 weeks. Note: study into how 682 integrated 061 into its biology is ongoing. This one I actually really like. Item SCP-053. Tissue test. NA overridden by O5 Command. What would she need the tissue or do with it? So, termination test record. 682 introduced to 053 containment area. 682 appears to be very confused and shows no sign of being affected by 053. 053 appears to be afraid of 682 and hides behind a chair in her containment area. 682 lowers itself to the ground, resting its head on the floor. 053 approaches 682, and after several seconds of hesitation, briefly touches 682 before rapidly returning to her hiding place. 682 does not react in any way. 053 approaches 682 and pats its head before causing it to exhale through its forward nostrils. 053 claps and hops in place several times before embracing the head of 682 for the remainder of the testing period. 682 appears to be in a very docile state, with only 2 low-level escape attempts being made. 053 is observed to bring toys and other items to 682 and make several drawings on its forward carapace with crayons. Staff entering at the end of the test phase are immediately attacked by 682, resulting in 2 deaths and 5 injuries. Just that. SCP-682 contained and moved to separate containment unit. 053 observed crying for several minutes after 682 was removed. Like he's a puppy. Notes: the reaction of 682 is notable for several reasons. Ugh. First, it was one of the few incidents where SCP-682 has come in contact with biological tissue and not entered a rage state. Second, it has raised questions as to the physical makeup and composition of 053 in regards to the lack of response of 682. Third, it has provided a possible solution to long-term containment. However, approval for the mutual containment of two highly dangerous SCP items in a single containment unit is not likely. Actually, I wonder what would happen if 053 and 999 interacted. I haven't read all the documents on this site. So yeah. 123. Tissue test recorded, absorbed by the core. Termination test record, test canceled after review of testing between 162 and 682. The potential issues arising from 682 gaining control of 123 are too great at this time. Review of proposal will be made if SCP-682 is completely incapacitated by some means, with no potential of escape or sudden adaptation. Okay, this one I was just reading and it is awesome. 173, tissue sample. NA overridden by O5 command. I don't even know if that thing has eyes. So, termination test record. 682 introduced into the containment area of 173. 682 makes several screeching noises and quickly presses against the wall furthest from 173, staring at it the entire time. 682 continues to stare at 173 without pause for 6 hours. Damn. Agents equipped with large caliber sniper rifles dispatched and shoot out the eyes of 682, at the same time stopping all observation of 173 and 682. Typo, I guess. Stopping all observation of 173 from 682. Whatever. After resuming observation, 682 is shown to be on the floor with several injuries around its head, neck, and legs. 173 is seen to have tissue from 682 on its hands. 682 rapidly regenerates, covered by thick clear caps of armored carapace. 682 maintains observation of 173 for an additional 12 hours. Damn! Despite additional efforts of agents and Foundation staff, 682 allowed to exit containment area and recaptured in temporary containment. Notes: after review, it appears 173 was unable to do lethal damage to 682 due to a major difference in physical size. A possible repeat of this test may be made if 682 is damaged enough to reduce its physical mass to be a level equal with 173. You know, why haven't they terminated 173 yet? I doubt they can exactly test much, and it is Euclid. Dr. Clef. Tissue test record, NA. 682 introduced to a testing area. Dr. Clef introduced to testing area. They stare at each other for approximately 3 minutes. Dr. Clef backs out of the testing area as SCP-682 continues to stare. Dr. Clef attempts to open door of testing area. Door of testing area determined to be locked. Dr. Clef reportedly uses several loud expletives? What? And then attaches, I don't know, there's a few typos here, an unknown device to the door, keeping his eyes on 682 the whole time. 682 continues to stare. Dr. Clef detonates a small plastic explosive charge on the floor, causing a containment breach. 682 continues to stare. Dr. Clef engages emergency secondary lockdown doors and declares a partial containment situation. 682 does not react. Dr. Clef proceeds to experiment observation center. 2 minutes later, 682 somehow kills Dr. Blank, the project head, by a broken neck caused by blunt force trauma against the control panel, despite remaining in the test area. What? Notes: this is the official story and we're sticking to it. The alternative that someone tried to murder Dr. Clef by deliberately putting him in the same room as 682 is completely inconceivable. 05-7. Why couldn't it have been the chief defenestrator? Item: high altitude impact. That's force. And not the force. They're not Sith. Though Dr. Bright might be. Tissue sample record denied by 05-blank. Termination test record testing denied by 05-blank. Notes: seriously? Seriously? Drop it out of an aircraft and let it fall. Who in the data expunged? Item: one ordinary human child. Issue test record. Okay, these next three I find sickeningly hilarious. Termination test record. Child began to scream and cry when 682 was introduced into the cell. Subject was immediately and messily devoured by 682. Notes: okay, so that didn't work so well. Maybe the fact that the kid was crying made 682 perceive it as a hostile intent. Guest researcher Dr. W. Whoever the fuck that is. Item: one ordinary human child drugged to cancel extreme emotional reaction. Again, issue test record NA. Termination test record. Child stood and smiled, giggling at S682 with no signs of fear. 682 devoured the subject messily. Notes: maybe we can try that again. I'm sure somewhere out there's a kid who will make friends with it like 053 did. Guest researcher Dr. W. Item: guest researcher Dr. W. Tissue test record NA. Termination test record. Subject screamed in terror and pounded on the door to the test facility, begging to be let out. 682 devoured it messily 3 minutes after being introduced. Notes: fucking sadistic asshole. I've got no sympathy for that moron whatsoever. Introducing children to this fucking monster. What the hell? Assistant Director Dr. Clef. Item: blank W blank cutting laser. This is a long one. Okay. Okay, tissue test recorded. Tissue sample was successfully bisected 13 times before adopting a mirrored finish. Termination test record. After multiple attempts, the main body of 682 was successfully bisected into parts that were equal in mass at T plus 7, 13 hours. Dead scraps were removed from the room, while the two halves, subsequently designated as SCP-682-A and SCP-682-B, regenerated. After the recovery period, A and B appeared to survey the area and evaluate each other, presumably in anticipation of attack. Surface fluctuations indicative of internal modification were noted, but all external changes occurred and disappeared far too quickly to be adequately described. High-energy bioluminescent organs on the face, spine, and forelimbs were observed as well on both specimens, usually forming, pulsing, and disappearing again over a course of a few seconds. At T 3542 hours, A and B simultaneously collapsed on the floor and all vital signs ceased, remaining in this state for the following 48 hours. At T plus 84 hours, the laser was used again in an attempt to cut A and B into more manageable pieces, 173, leading to minor structural damage to the room, as the laser reflected off their skin. As both A and B remained immobile despite the increased potential for escape, 2D class personnel were released in the room. Immediately upon their entry, data expunged. technical failure of observation equipment, and test chamber breach were detached from the outside, activating safety protocol T-98816 OC 108/682-N147. Containment was successfully re-established at the cost of blank security personnel, blank D-class personnel, and blank researchers, including doctors' data expunged. The majority of the testing area was considered unsalvageable and demolished for later reconstruction. Experiment supervisor Dr. Blank was found unconscious and in critical condition outside the observation chamber. See medical logs for blank on blank blank blank. Medical staff succeeded in sufficiently reviving him to be debriefed by Agent Blank, whereupon he was harshly reprimanded and data expunged. Note, only one SCP-682 was found in the lockdown area surrounding the wreckage, apparently at near full mass rather than the expected 50%. Scattered tissue within the facility account for the missing mass. Dr. Blank's testimony indicates that A and B exhibited a high degree of coordination following the security breach, but that once B became heavily damaged by security personnel, it was immediately devoured and reabsorbed by A. Total loss of one of the SCP specimens is considered highly improbable. Researchers and searches have been called to a halt. Agent Blank. Note, much as our department would love to know whether 682 retained a single consciousness during its dissection, or whether the two counterparts were actually able to coordinate until the stalemate was ended by external forces, for practical purposes, we do not, under any circumstances, advise trying that again. Doctor, however the fuck you pronounce that. Item 60 megaton thermonuclear bomb. Yeah! Tissue test recorded. None. Duh. Testing denied by 05. Notes. One would think that putting SCP-682 in the epicenter of an explosion that can cause third-degree burns at a distance of 300 kilometers is a good idea. But as long as there are odds of survival, we simply cannot go through it. Yes, it's a goddamn nuke, but if 682 survives and adapts, we'd be boned beyond belief. 05-blank. I bet Dr. Bright suggested that one. SCP-914. Tissue test recorded, data expunged. Termination test record, data expunged. Of fine or very fine is no longer to be used by any personnel having contact with 682 at any point. In addition, any objects that have come in contact with 682 at any point are not allowed to be processed by 914 in any attempt to subvert this directive. Data expunged. Notes, 682 is too large to fit in the booths in most forms. In addition, the tissue tests have shown that 682 has unpredictable reactions to 914. Finally, 914 is too valuable a research tool and too delicate for this type of test. It was nearly damaged after the incident. CN 682-119857 and data expunged. Be repeated should the results be recovered, data expunged. Notes, does this really surprise anyone, given that 916 to normal organics? Dr. G. Items 826. Getting all number scrambly up in here. Equipped with one copy of the generally nice friendly thing that can and will kill SCP-682 permanently if it so much as spots the damn lizard, the 12-page short story written by Dr. Blank detailing a large, friendly monster that is stated to be capable of permanently killing 682, and one D-class personnel equipped with one 2010 Ducati how the fuck you say that? Motorcycle for the purpose of evading 682. Tissue test record NA. Termination test record. Story is put between 826 and placed into a large empty room, blank meters by blank meters by blank meters in dimension. Wonder why they had to censor that out. Remotely operated doorway, large enough to send 682 through. 682 is brought in front of the entryway securely. Once researchers clear the area, doors remotely opened, exposing a green pasture similar to the one described in the story. 682 is reluctant to go through, so D-682-32 is sent through as bait. 682 follows through doorway, whereupon the doorway closes behind him. 30 minutes later, 682 bursts back through the door it was sent through. Somewhat worse up for wear, killing blank researchers and blank agents in the process. Recovery personnel describe the story's pasture as having become a battleground featuring impact creatures with enormous body parts scattered around. Parts are thought to be from the story Thing. Recovered story is entitled The Generally Nice, Friendly Thing That Tried to Kill 682 Permanently But Failed, and is notably thicker, with 209 individual pages that detailed an epic battle between the two monsters. Additional attempts to coax 682 and 826 have been met with non-compliance on 682's part. I wonder why. That sounds freaking awesome. Seriously, two dinosaurs the size of titans going at it. And when they're virtually indestructible. Who wouldn't want to watch that? Item 743. Sample consumed without incident. Termination test record. Mobile container with 743 was transported to testing chamber, into which 682 was released for primary containment. 743's container was opened remotely. 743 observed resting. 682 appears to ignore 743 after blank minutes. Ignore 743. After blank minutes, 743 started flowing. 682 appears to lap up the liquid from 743. After blank second, 682 grasped 743 with its forelimbs and started pouring the liquid straight down 743's mouth. Pouring the liquid straight from 743 into its mouth. 682 drank for blank minutes, at times data expunged on its back. 743 stopped flowing and started feeding. 682 tried to fight off and Swarm, but was soon covered. Swarm started to feed on 682, who stopped moving. Blank minutes later, after 682 had been reduced to 79% of its original mass, 682 opened its mouth and stuck out its tongue, which had become 5 meters long and sticky, like an anteater's. 682 started to lap up the ants off itself with its tongue, eating thousands of ants at once. 682 and 743 continued to feed off each other for blank hours until testing was terminated. 682 displayed faster than normal regeneration for blank days afterwards. Adapted tone remained for blank days. Note: SCP-743 treated 682 as organic, but that's hardly conclusive proof. More significant is the question of whether consuming 743's liquid contributed to 682's heightened regenerative abilities, if, as suspected, it did. 743 and 682 need to stay far, far away from each other. Dr. Lambert. And we've still got like half a page left. Half the damn page left. 063. Sample is eradicated. No traces above molecular level remain. How is 682 gonna get out of this one? 063 was refitted to the end of a rotary arm, which was deployed into 682's enclosure. Initial approach proves partially successful, with 682 losing more than 20% body weight before regeneration overtakes the destruction process. Newly regrown tissues are not vulnerable to 063's eradication effect. 682 destroys the deployment arm, and 063 digs a hole through the enclosure's ground where it is later recovered. 682 succeeded in extending a long, prehensible limb through the hole and maiming 2 security personnel before containment is re-established. Can I have 682 as a pet? He sounds fucking awesome. 682. Oh yeah, there are a lot of children here. I can't believe I just said that. Hypothesis. 682 is not bound to base Earth biological chemistry and can adapt itself to be organic or inorganic as necessary. Some of the boys in the lab are arguing whether we can even classify it as living, at least as we understand life. This worries me because an unliving, undying, intelligent monster, well, that's where you start getting sacrifices in your name. Dr. Zara. The fuck does he mean by that? Is it going to become a god after the apocalypse? I hope so. 807. Tissue test record NA. Termination test record. A 682 special, 10 kilogram of rotten meat and sharpened bone splinters, 10 liters of rancid mayonnaise, 1 liter potassium cyanide, and 1 kilogram of morphine hydrochlorinate, combined into a solid mass, then transmutated via 807, was dumped into the testing room. 682 devoured special and then began loudly demanding more. 9 minutes later, 682 collapsed. After 45 minutes of observation, 682 had not moved. 2 D-class personnel in anti-807 environment suits were sent in to verify 682 was in fact terminated. D-class were equipped with special suits with further specials in case 682 required further distracting. Specials were placed on the ground in front of 682's head. In response, 682 opened its eyes and began gnawing weakly at the nearest special. D-class personnel began touching 682, believing it had been rendered harmless. At this point, 682's skin ruptured and at least 11 locations, releasing high pressure to estimated 2.7 MP whatever the fuck that is. Jets of blood in all directions. Contact with 682's blood breached the integrity of the anti-807 environment suits, and both D-class personnel were contaminated. D-class personnel began data expunge. By this time, 682 had finished consuming the second special, its skin had healed over, and both D-class personnel had been terminated. 682 then devoured the third special with the same speed and enthusiasm as it had devoured the first. I have no comments. I thought I did, but no. Item 662. Tissue test record NA. Termination test record. Mr. Deeds is summoned and asked if he can destroy 682 permanently. His response, I'm terribly sorry, sir. I'm afraid I can't. Dr. Deeds is asked if he can kill SCP-682. His response, again, sir, I'm terribly sorry, but I'm afraid I can't. Dr. Deeds is asked if he is incapable of asks if he can incapacitate 682. I'm fucking up a lot. Dr. D's response, as a matter of fact, I can. Depending on how means the word incapacitate. And depending on how long the wishes are to be incapacitated, yes. Dr. Dees is explained to expand on how he would perform such an action. So, the simplest and quickest method which I must point out would not be the most efficient, would be for me to offer myself for the creature to devour me. Certainly, its offensive capabilities would be lessened whilst it's occupied consuming my flesh, but this would be the simplest as it requires no preparation on my part, sir. But I'm certain you'll understand that the overall effect on the creature would be insignificant were I to engage with the creature in combat. Either with or without weapons, I could certainly occupy its attention and offensive capacities for a longer interval. Unfortunately, I'm afraid the creature would eventually defeat me, at which point it would begin consuming my flesh, as I have previously described. However, I could certainly booby-trap my person with a variety of noxious substances, so whatever that is, perhaps, or explosives, or perhaps encapsulated neurotoxins, or even redacted, so that when the creature does inevitably consume me, it sustains further damage. That said, sir, I must remind you that the creature's tendency towards regenerations mean that any damage I inflict would sadly be temporary. Mr. Deeds is thanked and dismissed. Note: Mr. Deeds' knowledge of redacted is not to be considered a security breach. I'm wondering how these SCPs know about each other. Item 738. Yeah, I haven't read most of these. Tissue test NA. Termination test record. Researcher sits in SCP-738-2 and asks, what would you want in exchange for permanently destroying the entity which we refer to as 682, while leaving this planet, its biosphere, its human population, its human civilization, the SCP Foundation, and the rest of the universe intact? Entity takes form of the same entity as Test 203 and states, your Foundation couldn't afford it, and you personally definitely couldn't afford it, and does not respond further. Wonder what it wants. (272) No tissue test, and it's again very long. 682 is released into enclosure amidst a circular array of thirsty 2000-watt stadium lights, of which only one is switched on. 272 is dropped onto 682's shadow and embeds itself in the reinforced concrete as expected. 682 quickly discovers that it is trapped by 272's presence in its shadow and starts to attack 272. 682 then stops midway through its attack, examines 272 closely, bellows an incomprehensible string of words, and slowly backs away from 272. All thirsty stadium lights are then switched on and off in a random strobe effect, disco pattern at 4 HZ, whatever that is. 682 is forcibly hurled around the enclosure in random directions in accordance with the stroboscic whatever patterns, and sustains heavy damage. After 55 minutes of this process, more than 95% of 682's epidermis has been abraded away. Its anterior left limb has been severed. 63 of its teeth have been broken out of its jaw, and its skull has been fractured to the point that both of its eyeballs have been dislodged from their sockets. At this point, 682's exposed subdermal tissue begins to luminesce. Luminescence rapidly increases until it is brighter than the stadium lights, which eliminates 682's shadow entirely. 682 then collapses and is no longer affected by this pattern. 682 continues luminescing for 48 hours, remaining immobile for the duration. D-Class personnel who recovered 272 from the enclosure were not attacked, but sustained permanent retinal damage from 682's luminescence, despite wearing eye shields. After 48 hours, 682 resumes normal activity. Note, how did 682 not know not to attack 272? Did it recognize the artifact? Was it able to read the glyphs carved into 272's surface? If 682 is literate, is it vulnerable to textual mimetic kill agents? Suggested methods for a viability study are welcome. 343. Damn. Tissue test record. Termination test record. Hang on. It's a separate link. And it appears to also be in its own page. As does when 963 is used against it. Who the fuck's a... Oh wait, Dr. Bright's inhabiting that. Oh wait, the things Dr. Bright's not allowed to do. Who the fuck suggested that, and who the fuck would allow that? That is baffling. So yeah, I'm not going to be reading those in this video. Though I'm wondering how 682 would survive God himself and Dr. Bright. Okay, 702. Tissue sample offered as trade item to 702-1. 702-1 accepted, trading it for what appears to be a 2-patty hamburger as commonly sold by the redacted franchise. Probably less toxic than McDonald's. Termination test result record. 682 is contained and offered the trade item to 702-1, which considers the tank for roughly 13 minutes before taking in. Item left in exchange is a metal cage containing a specimen of a rose-ringed parakeet. 16 hours later, 682 is returned to the chamber where the trading was effected without its containment tank. 702-1 is reluctant to divulge information regarding this event. Examination of debris regurgitated by 682 during proceeding recontainment reveals fragments from a number of curious items, including data expunged. The parakeet is currently being kept at Dr. Quarter's office. I'm not gonna act like I understand how all this shit works. Okay, 096. Tissue test record, none. Termination test record. Containment tank containing 096 was placed in 682 cell. Personnel vacated vicinity and the test tank was opened remotely. Screams of the two entities continued for 27 hours, at which the noise abruptly stops. Sonar-based video feed reveals 096 severely wounded and huddled in the southwest corner, apparently upset. Feed shows 682 on the north end of the room, approximately 85% of its initial mass absent. Recontainment team retrieved both entities with relative ease. Further attempts to expose 096 to 682 causes it to turn away from 682, jumping in place while clawing at its face and screaming. 536. Tissue divided into samples and subject to individual effects of 536 dials. Notable results follow. Increase in the G. Temperature. Tissue restructures itself into neutron degenerate matter. E. Tissue maintains loose integrity as clouds of ions regenerates upon reestablishment of the normal laws of physics. Decrease in the theta, or decrease anyhow. Decrease in theta, tissue disintegrates. Test record. 682's containment tank is inserted into 053. Speed of light, strong nuclear force, and fundamental charge dials decreased progressively. 682's containment tank is nearly immediately destroyed. 682's body begins disintegrating. Due to intense light, radiation, visual is lost. Free neutrons, pions, kaons, and more exotic mesons, described in Redacted, are detected 55 seconds into the experiment. With the primary detection, equipment fails. Upon boot up of the secondary detection equipment, dials are at minimum levels. 682 is again visible in the chamber, reduced to roughly 1% of its normal size. Analysis suggests 682 has reformed into a previously unknown form of matter, kept together by quantum effects. ASST. Assistant researcher Blank becomes aggressive and turns the dials randomly and violently before being removed from the premises. 682 recovers its original shape upon restoration of standard physics. Note, I don't blame him. I could swear at one point that thing looked like it was actually enjoying the experience. They could try that one again, and yeah. 524. Consumed without incident. Termination test record. 524 and 682 introduced into testing chamber. 682 examines 524 suspiciously, at which point 524 begins gnawing at the anterior right limb. 682 jumps backwards, bellowing. 524 pursues 682 for 2 minutes, at which point 682 climbs 4 meters up on the wall of the testing chamber and is beyond 524's reach. 524 ceases pursuit and begins washing its face with its paws. It continues this activity for 15 minutes, during which time 682 remains 4 meters above the wall and beyond 524's reach. 524 then crosses to the other side of the test chamber and begins reaching containment. Test aborted. Aw. Sorry, I just looked at what 524 is. Okay. 811. Only 100 off from an offensive joke. Sample consumed without incident. Direct exposure of 811 to 682 disallowed due to unreasonably high risk of specimen loss. Instead, mucus from 811's palmoplantar surfaces collected over a course of blank months and then sprayed on 682 with high-pressure hoses. 682's body mass is reduced by 27% before the mucus reaches a complete bone covering in the remaining body mass and is unable to decay it further, probably due to adaptation. 1237. No tests for the tissue. Termination test record. A deliberate containment breach was induced, which an SCP-1237-1-L specimen was permitted to observe from a safe distance. 13 security personnel were killed before containment was reestablished. Specimen was dosed with blank to encourage REM sleep and onset of 1237, and induced a dream that 682 was a small house cat with no special abilities, and that the security team had been able to destroy it easily. 7 seconds after onset of 1237 event, subject began to seize violently. Subject was declared dead after 32 seconds. Autopsy discovered the subject's body covered with scratch and bite marks and infected with bubonic plague, toxoplasmosis, and subacute regional lymphocyst cat scratch fever. The bodies of the deceased security personnel displayed similar characteristics. A small house cat was found in 682's containment chamber, cleaning blood off its coat. The cat regenerated into 682 within 3 hours. Who wouldn't want to see that? A cat turning into a fucking dinosaur right before your eyes. Okay, 1361. Sample consumed without incident. DNA markers from 6A2 present in 1361. Sample afterwards. Sample showed increased resistance to incineration. Termination test record. A secondary sample of 1361 was allowed to grow to 100 kilograms in mass. 6A2's containment chamber was purged with acid, and 1361 was poured into 6A2 from above. 1361 covered and fully engulfed 6A2, and no activity was observed for 3 hours. In the period from 3 to 7 hours following the exposure, SCP-361 began to develop legs, jaws, a physical appearance similar to 6A2. SCP-1361 breached containment and attacked Foundation staff in a manner consistent with a 6A2 breach and killed 17 personnel. 1361 proved immune to small arms fire in this state. Aerial dispersal of napalm was necessary to destroy sample by incineration, after which a skeletal and circulatory system identical to 6A2 was retrieved from its remains. Remains were returned to 6A2's containment chamber, where they were regenerated into 6A2 within 6 hours. Subsequent tissue testing indicated that 6A2 temporarily contained DNA markers from several species present in 1361, as well as temporarily exhibiting a mild scent similar to pork rinds. Okay. 1933. Sample immersed in 1 liter of bodily fluids from 1933. Sample fully converted into Irish cream. Termination test record. 200 liters of body fluids were collected from 1933 over a 3-month period. Oh, didn't censor that number out. Fluids were introduced into 6A2's containment chamber in bulk. 6A2 began consuming fluids rapidly and manifesting apparent signs of intoxication far more rapidly than a human would after consuming an equivalent amount of Irish cream. This has been hypothesized by the result of portions 6A2's anatomy being into Irish cream. However, instead of dying, 6A2 continues consuming the fluids. When it has finished consuming all the fluids, 6A2 collapses on the floor and begins loudly vocalizing while clawing spasmodically at its face and abdomen. After 5 minutes of this, 6A2 begins vomiting up what appears to be bodily fluids of 1933, but in much larger quantities. As well, the floor and wall of the containment chamber are instantly converted into Irish cream upon contact with the vomitus, resulting in a structural failure and a containment breach. Test aborted. Remainder of vomitus incinerated. 6A2 subsequently manifests no further signs of intoxication. A drunk dinosaur. Who wouldn't want to see that? I keep saying that for some reason. 507. No tissue. 507 was physically attached to 6A2's left forelimb with nylon zip ties, while 6A2 was inactive due to physical destruction incurred during an unrelated containment breach. Attending personnel continues to spray 6A2's body, with the exception of the limb which 507 was attached to, with hydrochloric acid provided via high-pressure hoses. After 7 hours and 52 minutes, 507's anomalous properties activated it, and 6A2 did it, and both it and 6A2 both disappeared. Gone. 507 manifested in an unpopulated area adjacent to Site Blank, approximately 8,000 kilometers away. 63 hours later, attached to an entity possessing large fangs and a pair of vestigial wings, but otherwise identical to 6A2. by nylon zip ties of a different color than the ones applied by containment personnel at the beginning of the test. And a handwritten note was found pinned to 507's chest reading as follows: Dear Universe 5802-Sigma-Blue-Romeo, it's your problem now, suckers! I have no idea what the hell just happened in that one. Well, looks like we're at the last one, aside from the two I'm going to read later. $25.99. $25.99! No tissue. Termination test record. $25.99 was ordered to attack 682, quote, until it is 200% dead. $25.99 proceeds to engage 682 in combat for 42 minutes, at the end of which 3 of 682's limbs have been severed, its thorax had been crushed, and both of its eyeballs had been ruptured. $25.99 then seized 682's head, apparently in preparation to pull it off of 682's body. In response, 682 vocalized the phrase, "Kill me, you sack of organs, do it!" $25.99 immediately released 682 and stood unmoving until security personnel removed it from the testing chamber. Subsequent attempts to terminate 682 before it could regenerate from its injuries were ineffective. Note, it is hypothesized that the kill me in some way took precedence over the more abstract attack it until it is 200% dead. I have no response because I don't know what the hell just happened in that one. Couldn't they just couldn't they just give it the train ticket, then send it on its way? You know, the, shit, I forget what it's called, but, if you read a lot of SCP, you know what I'm talking about. That, SCP where you take the ticket, it'll turn into whatever kind of ticket you need to go to somewhere, and after you step off of whatever you're on, you get sent to another reality entirely. Yeah. Just saying, it might, yeah. So, sleep tight.